If you have been playing Valorant for a long time, you know that the topic of Valorant maps will usually always come up at some point throughout the year. Whether it's because you think a certain map sucks, whether you think it's because a certain map needs a rework, or because there's a certain map that has popped a lot in your queue, more than likely there's always a conversation that will come up about a Valorant map. However, this time around, it seems to be that the topic of discussion isn't so much about the maps themselves, but rather the sites that we hold and attack on each map. Specifically, what inspired this video, and what has really been inspiring a lot of this conversation online, was a tweet from the GOAT. We need more maps with actual bomb sites, instead of destinations where you plant, fall back, and either spray or util spam the spike. Most boring to play. Especially with Tenz recently retiring from esports, a lot of attention has been on Tenz. So when this tweet went out, a lot of people looked at this tweet, started this conversation that I think has kind of been happening throughout this year. There's something wrong with these Valorant maps. Tenz really gets at the main point that a lot of people have been getting at, but it's explicitly stated. It's not so much the map design itself, it's specifically the design around how players interact with the spike when it comes to the bomb sites. I think the most obvious point of contention is with the recent release of Abyss. If you've played on Abyss, you are no stranger to the fact that on both sites, as an attacker, your main objective is to still push into site, but you are not dedicating your resources to getting onto the site or getting past the site. And this is crucial because what is happening is that on both of these sites, you'll have maybe two attackers push onto the site, plant the spike, and the rest of the team is defending that spike from outside of the site. This is the scenarios that Tenz describes, where you have these teams that then after they've planted the spike successfully will fall back and they'll spray from a safe distance or util spam the spike. And the issue here isn't so much that these teams are supposedly, quote unquote, playing the game correctly. It's rather that the sites are designed to allow for this specific play to be the only good play to make. It is very rare that you're holding on to the site from within the site when it comes to Abyss. Sure, you may have one or two players on site pushing up rope over on A, or pushing up into heaven on B and holding a more close quarter engagement. The majority of the team is going to be holding from main, it's going to be holding from window, it's going to be holding from the wall that's on the left side of B that covers that entire area where spike can also be planted. The default plant, by the way, on B. Let's look at Haven, for example. On Haven, you have three sites, and of the three sites, I would argue that two of them have the ability for the attacking side to get onto site, plant the spike in a way where they can then hold that spike from a distance, from outside of sight. I'm talking specifically about C and B, because on A site, 99% of the time, as an attacker, you are not only going in to obviously plant the spike, but you're also making sure that you have a presence on the site, whether you're holding close on the graffiti wall, or you're holding in hell, or you're holding from truck, or you definitely have someone holding from short. Maybe you have someone watching flank from long, and that person will peek out once two or three people go down on site. There's a distribution that is primarily on the site, whereas on B is arguably one of the most contested sites because you have both the defenders from A and from C rotating in. B is a very close space, so you're going to have a lot of close quarter engagement, something like the op you don't want to have on B. However, there is a way that you can plant the spike, and it is also actually one of the default methods of planting spike, where you now have an attacker holding the spike from window. And what typically happens? Well, you'll smoke the person that's sitting on window, and you'll hope that they have no means of shooting the spike. If they plant it on this corner, you might be able to tuck yourself in there and hold on to the spike, and that person on window now is forced to push you up, but more than likely they've planted in the center of the site where it has a clear vantage point from the window, and that means that that person can, regardless of whether you smoke them off, just hold from window with whatever gun they have and spray through the smoke, and eventually they will connect with whoever is trying to defuse the spike. Likewise on C, the most common plant on C is planted so that somebody can hold from long. However, unlike Abyss, on C, you may have one or two people that back up into long to hold the spike from that position, but more than likely you have the majority of the team is still sitting on site, and they're making sure to delay the defending team from not only getting onto site, but also coordinating a push that eliminates that threat of whoever's sitting on long. By the time that the defending team can get through the attackers that are sitting on site, the time has dwindled. There's a lot of pressure on whoever needs to defuse the spike, and they probably also don't have enough time push into long. That is why if you have multiple defenders, you'll have somebody hop on the bomb, and then 3 of you will be holding long to get that peek and get that trade of whoever is holding from that position. Ascent has become a map that I don't necessarily enjoy that much, and I think a lot of the community is feeling that way because it's been the one map that has been pretty consistent, which is a good thing traditionally, but it's been the one map that hasn't really received any changes, and it's also somehow managed to be the only map that is always in the rotation. While all these other maps have rotated out for a season or two, Ascent has been the one map that for the last 4 or 5 years has been always present in the ranked queues. You are always playing Ascent, and because of that, I think for me at least personally, it's gotten a little bit stale. But when we look at the sites that are on Ascent, this is where you see the Valorant Map team shine, because both of Ascent's sites are known for being sites that you are holding directly from the site. Yes, on B, you can back up on a main, you can push up CT, heck, you might even want to push into market, but that is usually a 1-person or 2-person role. The majority of the team will hold from boathouse, will hold steps close, will hold from boxes. On A, you'll have somebody push up in a generator, you'll have somebody holding from switch, you might have somebody on dice watching heaven or watching door crouch, you'll have somebody in hell, you might even have somebody pushing up heaven. And yes, there is still somebody that will be holding from long, but it's very rare that a team will plant on generator so that it's positioned to be held from long and the entire team holds from long. It's a strategically terrible position to be in because, yeah, that choke is so small that not only do you get smoked, but you'll easily get pushed, and that's kind of the point of contention. In Abyss, it doesn't matter that you smoke somebody off or wall them off. More likely than not, your positioning as the attackers is so far back that in order for the defenders to get a trade from you, they have to be not only aggressive, but also coordinated. And I know what some of you might be thinking, but Mexx, doesn't this make the gameplay more consistent? It means that you can always expect what's coming next. Yes, in some regards, you are correct, but the truth of the fact is, games like Valorant, these tactical shooters, thrive when there are opportunities to have different strategies, to have different tactics that you can then implement when you're playing a match. I want you to think back to Ascent, and I want you to think back to the last 3 games of Ascent that you had. Arguably, there are probably a lot of similarities between those 3 matches. There's enough variability that those 3 matches played out differently from one to the other. Now I want you to think about your last 3 matches on Abyss, and this is where the issue comes up. If you're planning on B, I guarantee, I'm making the biggest assumption here, but I guarantee that your last 3 matches on Abyss, when you planted B, you planted off on the edge, making sure that the spike was far enough away from the box and close as it could possibly be to the edge. You never planted towards that middle piece of the site that's like in between the 2 boxes that sit on B. And if you were planning on A, you were smoking your way in, maybe getting 1 or 2 trades, smoking the person off row, planting in front of that little box that acts as a step to get onto the bigger box in the middle of the site, and then retreating back onto main. This is pretty standard for Abyss, and that is the issue. When you have these 2 strategies that are so dominant that you can pretty much expect the same thing on these maps over and over, game after game, that's when you realize that the design for where these bombs can be planted is fundamentally flawed. And I know I've been yapping for a while, and you're probably thinking, dude, you're just full of shit. You don't play the game enough. And you might be right. I actually don't play the game enough these days. I've definitely taken my fair share of a break. But even the map lead designer responded to Tenz and said, you know what? I actually agree with where you're coming from because I also feel the same way. So even the map team for Valorant has realized that this is quickly becoming an issue that they need to address. And it already kind of started. I haven't actually played the new Sunset, but Sunset recently got a change to how specifically their layout for the B site. It used to be that you could just walk up and, similar to Abyss, plant close so that you could hold from main. And now they've removed that area. So if you still want to plant for main, you have to push even further onto the site and contest even more of that site. That means that the attacking team is pushing up into market and holding from there as well. So even that small change has, I assumed, made changes to how an attacking team will distribute themselves post plant. And the last point I'll make in this long-winded rant is that making these maps is a difficult task to do. I've never doubted that throughout my time of playing Valorant. A lot of the Valorant community is quick to attack the development team and say, how are they getting it wrong? They should know by now. We're what, 4 years into the game? Like, things should be clear and concise. They should know what us as the players want. I think that having that tweet from the lead map designer and responding to Tenz and agreeing with him, I think it not only validates that the community it validates the feelings from the community of like, hey, there's an issue here. Why are we seeing the same playstyle over and over on these maps? But it also allows us to see that like, hey, the design team has seen this and they're actively working on making some of these changes. I assume that Sunset change was good. I haven't played it. Let me know in the comments if you think it was a good change or not, but I would argue that it probably was for that map. I think a lot of people already struggled to come to terms that Sunset was a decent map. I know a lot of people initially when it came out were not fans of that map, and I think that that particular site had a lot to do with that because it was very difficult as a defender to take control of that site. You really had to bank on the attackers making some mistakes in order for you to come up on top. I think Abyss is going to be the biggest obstacle that the dev team faces because as it's currently played now, it is too toxic for the community to keep it going. And yeah, you could just say, well, why don't you just eliminate the area that's by the cliff? And on A, why don't you eliminate the area that's right in front of the box? I think that would be a great decision, but I don't know the logistics behind it. I'm sure there are a lot of things and considerations that they have to make as they're designing these maps. And so I don't have any of those numbers. And I assume that's what they're looking at when they say that they're reviewing this and they're trying to make changes. But with all that said, thanks for sitting through this. I haven't tried throwing my hat into the ring with a conversation like this in a very long time. And although I might not be playing the game as much, I'm still very active online on the Valorant community, trying to hear what other people are feeling and obviously providing some insight from my experience, not only playing Valorant, but playing other games. Again, I am a huge enjoyer of Valorant. I really do enjoy playing this game whenever I get a chance to play it. But seeing this playstyle develop has definitely made the game a little bit stale for me. And so I definitely agree with Tenz. This needs to be addressed. I hope it is addressed. It sounds like the dev team is looking to do something about it, which is always exciting to see as a player. So with all that said, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate if you stuck around to the very end. Consider subscribing. I haven't really done a subscriber push in a while, and I'm not really sure how this video is going to go since it was more of a yap sesh. But if you enjoyed what I had to say, or if you had any comments of yourselves, or you want to contribute to the conversation, as always, feel free to comment down below. I'll do my best to respond to any of those comments, and I will see you all for the next video. Peace out.